Okay, why don't we go ahead and get started? This is the Mayor's Forum. As you probably figured out, is that everybody's a participant. So please just make sure you mute. It's an open forum. So if you have a question or you want to discuss something, feel free to jump in, raise your hand. We kind of go whichever way the discussion kind of goes. And tonight we're fortunate because we're going to be talking about fire prevention. And we're really lucky because we have with us Mark Brown, who's the Executive Officer for Marin Wildfire Protection Authority. He's joining us via phone. We also have Chief Ruben Martin with the Central Marin Fire. And then we also have Todd Landau, who is the Wildfire Hazard Mitigation Specialist. And not to age anybody, but I kind of like took a look at your bios today and I kind of added it up. We're probably looking at about 90 plus years experience. So I think we're just fortunate.
Just Mark Brown.
Easy there, Todd.
So I think we're fortunate, though, to have so much experience just, again, locally and just on this call. I just really appreciate the time you guys have with putting in with us tonight. I usually kick it off by asking like a little bit about background, but since there's three, I'm just going to do it a little bit different, not to put anybody on the spot. Why don't you just tell us one fun fact about yourself that's non-career related? And we'll start with Todd because he has the biggest smile.
Fun fact, not career related. I don't fly fish nearly as much as I ought to and need to. Fly fishing is my passion, and right now, as soon as we're done with this call, I'm going to start dreaming about where the next fishing location is.
And it doesn't matter if the water levels are low; you have to find where they're high.
Yeah, happy to do that.
Ruben, what about you?
Fun fact. Let's see, it's been kind of consuming my life for about a year now. About a year ago, I purchased a 1965 pickup truck to restore, and pretty much of learning how to do it all via YouTube, from welding to cutting to bodywork, from painting it with a rattle can, you name it. But it definitely is my escape, so it's fun.
Are you close to finishing it?
The cab is all in primer, and then I'm going to start stripping the bed off here pretty soon.
Okay. Because you remember there's the Lions car show coming up in September.
Yeah, so I'm hoping that at least it'll be off the jack stands by then.
All right, and then Mark, what about you?
Well, I'm an umpire for Little League, and I umpired the same Little League that my dad played at, I played at, and all of my boys played at. And then I figure I have a successful game if both sides of the game are equally mad at me.
I won't say what about the parents.
Parents are never happy with anybody. So
Thanks. I appreciate you guys sharing that. For those of you that are joining us again, this is an open forum. So if you have any questions or you want to go discussions in a certain way, please let us know. A couple things I like to cover, and I'm just going to throw it out to all three of you. Fire season, I guess, is coming upon us on a scale of 1 to 10, where it's like everything's great, there's no worries, to the 10 where it's like, OMG, where do you guys see us at this fire season? And I open up, so I'll leave it to you guys who wants to speak first.
Well, I think Mark kind of summed it up at one of his last meetings, last go around, that we in the fire service always kind of internally talk about it's going to be the worst fire season ever. I think that kind of came into fruition in 2017 and has never stopped since. Every year has always been one up from the year prior. And then looking at what the National Incident Fire Coordinating Group is saying is that they anticipate just an extreme fire season this year as they have in the past. Even though we did receive some rains earlier this year, unfortunately, it's not enough rain for the big, large, mature stands of vegetation that's out there to become saturated and hydrated. And I can let Mark take it from here. He's got probably the most experience in commanding wildfires amongst all three of us. He sat as the incident commander on several large fires. So I'll kind of let him take the floor here.
Thanks, Ruben. And Ruben hit an important topic, and that was how much rain we've gotten. And we got a ton of rain in October and December, and we've been getting some spurts of rain over the last month or so. And some of our rain totals look like we are at normal rainfall or near normal. But the problem is it came in such large single doses, and the fuels just can't absorb the moisture that much. So water-wise, some people may think we're out of the drought, but the fuels don't know that. So they're still primed to burn. And after the campfire, the CAL FIRE director, Pimlott, was quoted on 60 Minutes as saying, when they asked him if how this fire environment can changing and how it's been increasing and getting worse every year. And I love his quote. He said, "There's no reason to believe it's going to reverse itself." And after a year, or as Ruben said, is after a year after year, where we think we've seen the worst fire season, the next fire season somehow finds a way to top it. So given the fuel conditions, given 2 droughts back to back with barely a break in between, and the way California is, if we get ignitions and we get bad weather in the summertime, then we are primed to be as bad, if not worse, than last year. And I really don't like to be a fear monger, but the data is just showing that.
Yeah, no, I appreciate being up front. When you say fuel, are you talking about grass, trees, or just everything in general?
Pretty much when we say fuel, and we are kind of having to change our paradigm and start talking about houses as fuel, but we're talking the grass, the brush, the trees, whether they're live or dead, anything that's growing is what we consider the fuel. And we classify them by live fuel or dead fuel. And then for the dead fuel, we classify them in sizes based on how fast they absorb or give up moisture. And that's why when we talk about those rain spurts that came all at once, the fuels can only absorb the moisture so fast. And then they have those long dry periods where they give up the moisture just as fast as they gained it.
So for example, if you start looking at your large mature tree stands, those are your 100 and 1,000 hour fuels, which basically means you need that much time to become fully saturated or completely bone dry. So when we did get that short amount of rain, just think about it. It rained for 2 days, got into the ground, and then the trees and the brush slowly absorb it, but never at a rate where you've got 1,000 hours of complete saturation.
Okay. So just out of curiosity, if there was, say, a fire in Marin, what kind of resources would you guys be throwing at that? You know, would that be CAL FIRE? Would it be Cerenfeld Fire, individual fire agencies, Marin County? Would it be like all the above? Would it depend where it's at? And maybe I think there's been 2 incidences of some grass fires within the last year. Maybe one of you can talk about those and just kind of how you threw everything at once to kind of crush those immediately or rather quickly.
Yeah, we throw everything based on what our dispatch level is, whether it's low, medium, or high. And those are pre-designated number of engines we would put out on an incident. So a low incident may require 2 or 3 engines. High dispatch may require more resources at it. Here in Marin, we've realized that no one agency can handle one of these wildfires on our own. So we start to throw everything that we possibly can at it at the local government level. And then with our relationship with Marin County Fire Department out in West Marin, we're able to then start throwing some CAL FIRE resources at it. To try to get as many resources on the road as what we call that reflex time, to when we get there, we can then evaluate what's burning, how big it is, what the potential of that fire is going to be. And then we can either augment what the initial dispatch is or reduce it based on what we find. And that's pretty much how we do it here. And talking about the few fires that we had last year, there was one right there where we call almost at the border of Corte Madera and Tiburon. And so that became what we call a mutual threat zone, where it impacts several jurisdictions. And so we were able to throw both Corte Madera resources, Central Marin resources, Marin County Fire Department resources based on the boundary where it was located, and then all of our Southern Marin Fire resources at it. And then depending on where it is, where it's located, we then can allocate some air resources through our relationships with Marin County Fire Department. And then Mark, who for several years was the deputy fire chief for Marin County Fire Department, can add to that if you'd like.
Yeah, you bet, Ruben. And one of the things I think many of the members of the public don't realize that with Marin County Fire being a contract county with CAL FIRE, that means we enjoy all of the resources that CAL FIRE has. And I think a lot of members of the public think that aircraft come as a second thought, that we arrive at saying, oh, look, we have a fire, we need aircraft. But in reality, for medium and high dispatch fires, which we are in a medium dispatch level for 90+% of the summer, we automatically have aircraft. So we have an air attack, which is the person that coordinates the air attack from the air, 2 tankers, and then 1 copter for a medium dispatch. And then for a high dispatch, we add an additional copter. So what I like to, the example I like to give for that fire that Ruben was talking about that has a local government response as well as a Marin County Fire / CAL FIRE response. On dispatch, we have 22 pieces of equipment either flying or driving to that incident. And it's all about reflex time, as Ruben put it. And it's, you know, we want to put as many resources on a fire as fast as we can to get control of it. Because what we find is if fire exceeds 10 acres, then it gets exponentially more difficult for us to suppress it.
Okay. And the 22 pieces of equipment you mentioned, are those all pretty much dedicated to Marin County, or are some of those like aircraft and helicopters, are those shared with other counties within Northern California? Or, and let me ask you, tag on to that, do sometimes they get pulled, like if there's a major fire up in Redding, do some of those resources get pulled to head up again to a major fire, some outside of Marin County?
That second question is a fantastic question, but let me address the first one. For the rolling stock, the equipment that is rolling to the fire in Marin, it's all, the vast majority, with a few exceptions here or there, will be from Marin. It'll be the aircraft that's coming from outside of Marin. On a normal day, our air attack and our 2 tankers is coming from Sonoma County Airport, and our copter will either be coming from Boggs Mountain, which is on the Lake County, Sonoma County border, or Alma, which is on the Santa Cruz, Santa Clara County border. But your second question is a fantastic question, and it's a strategy type decision that CAL FIRE and the Forest Service has made a long time ago. It's the new and emerging fire that has a priority for the aircraft, because we know that that new fire, it will receive the most benefit from the aircraft. So if there is a large 10,000, 15,000 acre fire burning in Sonoma County, and we have a new and emerging fire in Marin County, they will actually remove 2 of the aircraft from that 10,000 acre fire and send them to Marin, because that's where they can have the most likely extreme benefit for the incident. The reverse is true. If we have that 10, 15,000 acre fire in Marin and Sonoma County has a new and emerging fire, then we're likely to lose 2 of our aircraft to that incident. But typically on those large 10,000 acre fires, you usually have 6 to 8 tankers assigned to you at once. And so losing 2 is kind of a small net loss for the big fire, but a huge gain for that new fire.
Okay. And then what about, I know a lot of times I've seen them on the news where, or I've heard about them where, you know, all of a sudden Central Marin or Santa Fe, you know, they'll send like a couple engines or a couple crews, again, I'm picking on Redding for whatever reason, up north, you know, to help them with their fires. How do you balance that out to make sure that, I want to say, you know, Marin County is still what's some protected, or, you know, Central Marin Fire has enough resources in case something happens here? How do you balance all that out?
Yeah, so every morning during the summer months, what we end up doing is getting together and putting together a strike team list, so pre-designated who can send out an engine. For example, if, like you said, if there's a fire in Redding, most likely if it's a state fire, Marin County Fire Department will be the first ones within the county that leave. They'll send 5 Type 3 engines, which is your 4-wheel drive engines, and a strike team leader. So a total of approximately 20 firefighters. And then they'll leave behind Type 3 engines within all their stations. So they're fully staffed at home. Marin County Fire Department, having the luxury of being a contract county with the state, hires approximately 100 firefighters during the summer months as an additional staff to bolster what we have within the county that then we can send throughout the state. Now, for the local government agencies, we get together and try to figure out what the predetermined strike team matrix is. So we could already pre-designate which resources are going to go first. We check with all of our crews to see who's available. And then we also predetermine who we can then recall on overtime to backfill those stations. So at a minimum, we may brown out a station for a couple of hours. However, we try to keep every station within our operational zone covered as much as we possibly can. Now, given when there's people dying and houses are burning, we send as much as we possibly can immediately and then try to backfill as quickly as we possibly can without trying to reduce some of that reflex time.
Okay, thanks. And I know one thing I like is I go hiking a lot up on Mount Tam by Mountain Home Inn. It seems like one of the key county fire stations is the one that's right close to Mountain Home Inn, because there it seems like you're perched up on top. They have a great view looking down, so they can probably easily spot fires and hopefully get to them rather quickly, whether that be Mill Valley or on the, I want to say the Mount Tam Stinson beach side.
Yeah, believe it or not, Todd and I used to be partners and worked at that station about 15, 16 years ago. And Mark Brown was our battalion chief at the time. So we were a team back then, fought a lot of fire together. And when you talk about Throckmorton Ridge, which is the station that's up there, like you said, it was uniquely stationed and placed there because the Gardner Lookout or Mount Tam Lookout almost has a blind spot into that Muir Woods Valley down there. So for sure, that station there plays a key role in the fire protection within Mount Tam.
It's funny how life is short because you guys all worked together how many years ago? Now you're back together again.
Exactly. The boys are back together again.
That's right.
And
if I could add on to Ruben's discussion of the daily calls and the amount of behind the scenes work that's going on to keep the county safe. We talked about the work that goes on when we're sending engines out, but there's also a tremendous amount of work that goes on when we are entering in the critical fire danger days. And we have two ways of augmenting our staffing. One of them is through the Marin County Fire, CAL FIRE relationship, where CAL FIRE will actually augment the amount of money that they're paying Marin County Fire to upstaff up to 3 engines or more at times, an extra water tender, an extra chief officer. And then the California Office of Emergency Services, or Cal OES, has a preposition pool of money that we can fill out the required paperwork to describe what the fire danger looks like. And then the state of California, through their OES, will pay for sometimes, most of the time, 5 additional engines, sometimes 10 additional engines to have in locally in Marin available for response. And you mentioned Throckmorton Fire Station and its strategic value. And Ruben talked about occasionally browning out stations. Throckmorton is one of our must cover stations, and that is a station, unless they are currently on a call in their local area, that will always have a fire engine at it.
Okay. Yeah, it always fascinated me because I never realized until like 2 or 3 years ago. I just thought when you sat there saying, oh, there's a high fire danger, for whatever reason, you guys just kind of knew this stuff. But there's a whole scientific behind all that data that you're getting, right? Whether that be weather patterns, moisture in the ground, humidity. It's all scientific to a certain degree, isn't it?
it is, yeah. We get the weather report every morning. Most likely, like when we see a red flag warning, it's typically high temperatures, low relative humidities, and the big key indicator is your wind, because the wind is your driver of these wildland fires. So when we start seeing the wind patterns, I want to say it's above 20, 25 miles per hour, and Mark can correct me on that one. We get a notice from the National Weather Service basically stating we're going to have either a fire weather watch, which means most likely it's going to turn into red flag warning day. And then that tells us as fire managers that we should anticipate a small fire has the potential of getting larger. So then we start, like Mark had mentioned, all the behind the scenes work of, okay, can we upstaff? Do we have people to come in? Can we then apply to Cal OES to get this augmented resources here within the county? So there is a lot of science that goes on behind it. And those are for the red flag days, but we're also looking and monitoring the weather on your regular, normal days. One of the things that we need to remember is that we need to worry about the fires that happen 90 to 95% of the times, which aren't on your red flag days. And those are the fires that we want to contain to 5 acres or less. before they can then become larger in the event of these larger weather events to move in and then cause these fires to get out of control.
Okay. One more question on the equipment and staffing side, and then we're going to talk to Todd about the 38-mile fuel break and some vegetation mitigation. But do you think right now that between the county and local fire departments that you're adequately staffed and that you have sufficient, this is a loaded question, sufficient equipment? Because I know you probably sit there saying, oh, we can always use more, but just kind of like at this point in time, you think you're sufficiently set up that way?
I think we're sufficiently staffed to handle 90% to 95% of the fires that we get, the wildland fires. It's those small fraction of major incidences that go into extended attack, which is greater than a 12-hour period, that then we start looking at augmenting our resources, whether it's from Sonoma County, the East Bay, the South Bay, you name it, we start calling for help. Similar to what Southern California would do if they're having major fires in that area, they would then try to handle it with the resources on the initial attack. But then if it gets beyond that operational period or greater than those 10, 15, 20 acres, then they start calling other resources coming in. Okay. But on your normal typical days, we have the resources available to handle almost any emergency that's thrown our way.
And then Mark, what about the county side of it?
Oh, you know, I really think that when Ruben's talking, he's talking as the county as a whole, because that's really the way we approach it. And but statistically, for the state responsibility area, which is what Marin County Fire has the charge to protect, we keep the 97% of all fires at 10 acres or less, and that's been it's wavered between 97 and 98% for at least the last 20 years.
Okay, switching. Does anybody have any questions or comments? Go ahead, Susie. You're on mute.
Hi, thank you. Oh, so I did have one question about you have enough people to do the work, right? I mean, it seems like every single industry, there's not enough help anywhere. So as far as the bodies go, do you have enough firemen and enough, are they there?
Right now we have enough bodies. What we're finding in the industry, similar to everybody else, is we're having a hard time finding new employees. For back in the day when I first got hired, is a fire department would hire and you'd compete with 500, 600, 700 applicants. Now we try to hire 3. I had 10 applicants.
Wow.
The workforce is getting less and less and less. So what we need to do as a fire service is start stepping up our game in the recruitment effort and start helping, trying to get some of these young individuals motivated in the fire service by one way or another.
Get that popular uniform, the pride that's there. I do have a question. Zone Haven. I feel like it disappeared. Are we still using it?
Yes.
Is it Zone Haven?
It is still here.
Because I know there was going to be a big push. I guess that's Todd's area, right? I don't know. But I feel like maybe like the NRGs, maybe we need to put it out there more or do some more with it. Is that?
So there's going to be a big Know Your Zone campaign coming out.
Still coming.
Yeah, still coming out later this spring, early summer. Zone Haven, what we've been doing as emergency managers is working on the back end to make sure that each zone is clearly identified, that it's accurate. So when we do use it to notify you as citizens, is that you're getting correct information. So we're working with our law enforcement partners, working with all of our other fire agencies, kind of going through on the backdoor end of it. It's funny, we had a meeting about Zone Haven today with County OES to see where we're at, where we're going, to make sure that every information that's on there is accurate. On the fire side, we're going to start doing small tabletop exercises and start implementing Zone Haven. But just think of it as a platform where it makes for emergency managers to be able to notify you as residents in an organized fashion on how to evacuate and when to evacuate, as opposed to it being an app that you need to sign up for. So all you need to do is notify or know how to find your zone. Part of it is through emergency.marincounty.org or through zonehaven.com, I believe, or .org.
Should we be bringing that into the drill that we're going to do that is the at-home drill?
I think we should.
Yeah.
One of the things that we're doing here internally is we're having refrigerator magnets printed with a QR code that state, know your zone. It's going to have an empty blank spot for you for a Sharpie to write in what your zone is.
Oh,
And we're going
cool.
to start handing them out at our disaster preparedness festivals and fairs and educational opportunities. So that way you can click your QR code, type in your address, and it'll tell you what zone you're in. And what we,
Ruben, I'm sorry, can you give just the background in case people aren't aware what Zone Haven is?
yes, so Zone Haven is an evacuation or more of an evacuation platform. So it broke the county up into manageable zones that allow us as emergency managers to then notify a specific group or neighborhood that it's your turn to either shelter in place, give you an evacuation warning, giving you time to prepare, or give you an evacuation order, telling you that you need to leave your area now, and we'll tell you for the reason. And also, it's a great tool for residents to use when we start the repopulation, because then you can monitor that site for real live information, where the fire is located, what zones have been evacuated, what zones are under a warning, and what zones are being repopulated. And it follows a red, yellow, green. Green means normal, yellow means you're under a warning, and red means that you've been evacuated or you're under some type of order. Okay. And so as a homeowner, what you would do is get an alert through Alert Marin, is our notification system that we use through the county. So for example, say if there's a fire on Christmas Tree Hill, we would put a notification out through Alert Marin, notifying you what zones are being evacuated based on a pre-designated number. So it's a 3-letter identifier. For example, if you live in Corte Madera, it's a COR, and then followed by a 3-number designation. And so it's imperative that you as a homeowner know where your home is located. So in the event that you get that notification of zone COR 001 is being evacuated, it's your turn to evacuate. However, we also put in there a local descriptor that us as local community members know that this zone is Christmas Tree Hill. This zone is Chapman Park. This zone is East Corte Madera and so forth. It's up in the Marina Vista area. And then it'll also give you a descriptor of what streets are within that evacuation zone. For example, it may be east of Summit, south of Magnolia, or whatever street that's there within that descriptor.
Okay. Has that been implemented? I should say implement. Has that been used at all for an actual incident?
Yes, we actually used it, or County OES used it last year. There was a fire up in the Lucas Valley, Marinwood area, where they actually put out notifications using Zone Haven as identifiers, and then the notification went out using Alert Marin.
Okay, thanks. Again, if anybody has any questions or comments, please raise your hands. So let's switch to Todd. Vegetation mitigation. Understand that the MWPA is looking at doing I may say the verbiage wrong and I apologize, a 38-mile shade fuel break, which would reach probably from Larkspur all the way into Corte Madera. Can you describe that project? And I know there's been some, like, I want to say, environmental concerns where people have this vision, you're going to come in there and clear cut all these trees, 100-foot wide strip, 38 miles, and strip everything down. It's my understanding that's not the case. You're looking at non-native, removing vegetation from the ground, that kind of stuff. So if you can just maybe describe that project and what's going on with it, and maybe the time frame also. Thanks.
Sure. I don't want to get too deep into this, but I just want to give a little background that beginning in 2015, really before the North Bay fires and this current trend of massive growth in wildfires in California, we started work on updating the Marin Community Wildfire Protection Plan. We received a grant from CAL FIRE to update this really important plan that helps us access federal funds and understand risk in Marin, and develops an organized approach to mitigating wildfire risk. That update was, we took for the first time a really science-based approach. We used computer modeling to better understand how fires might burn under current conditions, taking into account climate change and changing fuel conditions from 100 years of fire suppression in the county and just changing development patterns. And we published that report just before the North Bay fires happened. It's been a fantastic guiding document for us. It identified several key concepts for projects for us to look at in the future. And so the fuel break that you're describing is in many ways an outgrowth of that. During the development of the CWPP, we noticed something really important to understand about Marin's development patterns. And this is especially true in the Ross Valley, all the way from Corte Madera to Fairfax. The development is actually fairly tightly located. And when we look at where the houses are, if we were to imagine a boundary around the houses of 200 feet, that's an important number. That's 200 feet is about the distance where science tells us vegetation is a significant threat to the structure itself. When we draw a boundary of 200 feet around all of the houses in the Ross Valley, we did this in using GIS software, and what it gave us was visually a very clear picture that we had a bubble in the Ross Valley. All of the houses, the 200-foot zone, were connected. And that helped us when we looked at it from a fire science perspective, and we brought in the fire managers and the vegetation experts. We looked at the mapping, we looked at the wildfire modeling we'd done as part of this process, and we realized that there was an extremely distinct 200-foot wide boundary around the entire community of the Ross Valley, separating the built environment where homes are from the undeveloped lands, open space, Marin Municipal Water District, and even a handful of big private parcels, especially towards Fairfax. So we realized that we had this unique opportunity to create a buffer between the homes and the wildlands. And this was really emphasized, the importance of this, I think, with many of the fires, include the Camp Fire, but especially the North Bay fires. The Tubbs Fire in 2017 was an interesting lesson for us, where we recognized that in the beginning of that fire and many others, the fires started as a vegetation fire, as a wildfire. Right. They didn't start within the center of a community. They started in the wildlands adjacent to communities. These fires were wind driven, and the fires burned into the community and ignited many homes at once. Once many homes are burning, it creates a chain reaction where the fire begins to spread from home to home. More and more embers are generated by homes burning, much more so, much more energy is released than if it was just vegetation burning. And we create really a chain reaction that resulted in these conflagrations in Paradise and Santa Rosa twice. And we have a unique opportunity to prevent that. That's 5 minutes of background on how we got here. When we created the concept for this fuel break, we recognized we could create a 200-foot wide buffer, which is exactly the distance that science tells us this is most important to work in. We could look at this boundary at the outside of the built environment, the communities, and when we did that, we saw that the vegetation there was heavily overgrown. It was dominated by invasive plants like French broom, Scotch broom. We saw a tremendous accumulation of dead vegetation. 20 plus years of sudden oak death has caused a huge accumulation of dead and down vegetation from live oak trees that have died. Many trees are reaching the end of their natural life cycle. We have introduced trees like Monterey pine that are really common in people's backyards that are in decline due to climate change, infestations of beetles, and just reaching the end of their lives. So we have these vegetation conditions that can create a huge amount of energy when they burn right at the edge of the community and right against the houses. We know that homeowners are responsible for maintaining vegetation 100 feet from their homes or to their property lines. But we want to take it farther than what homeowners are required to do. And we also recognize that many homeowners have deferred their maintenance for decades sometimes. They didn't realize that this was such a threat. And now they find themselves in the situation of wanting to improve their wildfire risk by reducing vegetation, but it's too much. It's more than they can take on. So with the passage of the MWPA, the recognition that we have this very distinct boundary around our community, and the recognition that the fix is relatively simple. It's a big project, but it's a simple project. We need to pick up the accumulation of dead vegetation that's on the ground. That vegetation would not have been there if humans hadn't interfered in Marin 150 years ago. Wildfires, natural wildfires would have burned that vegetation. We would see a much healthier forest than we have now. The introduction of these invasive plants like French broom and acacia that are choking some of these areas are creating fire hazardous conditions. Those things wouldn't have happened if we hadn't interfered. And those things also, in addition to creating a fire hazard, are creating an unhealthy forest environment in general. It's not good habitat for the plants and animals that are supposed to be living here. So we have an opportunity with Measure C and the funding that's available to us for the first time to try to tackle a big project like this. When we mapped it out, I was surprised to see that it wound up being 38 miles because the Ross Valley is only about 8 miles long. But the boundary, it takes a circuitous route around the edge of the community, up into Madrone Canyon, over Christmas Tree Hill, through San Anselmo, Fairfax, and then back around to Sleepy Hollow, all the way to San Rafael. What that boundary is 38 miles long. If I had known that from the beginning, I might not have bit off such a big piece to chew here. That's not true. But we have the funding to get this started. We anticipate, when we've conducted an environmental review and a planning process for the last year, thanks to $250,000 that we set aside from the MWPA just for this project to plan it. We were able to estimate the cost of completing this project is between about $3.5 to just under $6 million. We know that it's if we have the funding available, we can complete this project at the soonest in about 3 years, realistically a little more than 3 years to complete the project. And we have begun to set aside the funding. The planning is essentially complete now. We conducted environmental compliance and review using what's called the California VTP, Vegetation Treatment Program. It's a fully approved environmental impact report published and approved by the state. It covers this type of work. We went through that environmental review process. We continue to work on the environmental compliance. We have teams of botanists who are actually out today surveying, looking for the potential disruption of rare plants. They will identify locations where we need to use more sensitive techniques to protect what's already there. And you mentioned that there's concern from the environmental community and just residents about the potential impacts. I think we've shown that the work we're going to do is going to benefit the native plants that are supposed to be here. But the French broom is choking out many of our native wildflowers and rare plants, or restoring a 200-foot buffer is going to provide better habitat, safer location close to homes, and it will provide, really importantly, this is the last part before I take your questions, really importantly, it provides a safe place for firefighters to work when a fire approaches the community. The intent of this fuel break is not to stop a wildfire from reaching homes. It's not to put a fire out without intervention. It's to provide a place where flame lengths will be shorter when they reach the community, where a fire will spread slower. When it reaches this fuel break, we would anticipate that the flames will reduce because there's not as much vegetation. The speed of the spread of the fire will slow down and give firefighters an opportunity to potentially extinguish fires before it reaches homes. It'll give residents a safer path to evacuate because there will be less intense flames near their home should they need to. And it potentially breaks up the continuity of this vegetation. So a fire that's in the watershed or a fire that's spreading from Novato towards the Ross Valley, like happened in 1923, we may buy ourselves an opportunity to protect the community before it becomes involved, like Santa Rosa and Paradise.
Okay, thanks. I just have one quick question, and I'll go ahead and go to Mary. Is it going to start like from Fairfax and then you're working your way to Corte Madera, or is it the opposite, or are you picking the worst areas first?
We'll be working on several locations simultaneously. Beginning this year, there will be some work in Corte Madera, and primarily the Alto Bowl area. So you'll see from Horse Hill through the Alto Bowl, and then some work up towards the top of Christmas Tree Hill is one of our top priority locations. When we looked at this science-based approach to where the risk is, we recognize that the Sleepy Hollow community and parts of Baywood Canyon and Fairfax are actually the locations that will benefit and provide the most benefit to the entire Ross Valley, including Larkspur and Corte Madera, believe it or not. So the majority of this year's work will be there. You'll see in the 2022-23 budget year, in the following budget year, you'll see work done from San Anselmo to Larkspur, and we anticipate finishing all of the holes that are left in the following budget year, so 3 years from now.
Okay, thanks. Mary, go ahead.
I'm going to try to limit this to 3 minutes because it's a long story spanning since 1998. Myself and neighbors on Chickasaw Court and also on Birch Avenue have been concerned over the years about a stand of black acacia trees that has grown from suckers in 1998 to a stand that's about 30 feet tall. The stand is on the High Canal, immediately behind the homes at 41 and 45 Birch. We live across the street across the canal at 51 Chickasaw, which provides us or has provided us some unique observational moments over these many years. I've talked to and emailed and met with town folks over the years, most recently since, 2014, 2015, 2017, 2018. I have talked to Kevin Kramer, Michael Palmer, RJ Suoko, Peter Brown, about having the trees either trimmed or removed. Being an environmental biologist myself, trimming might actually do the job to preserve, a place for birds and things like that, which are important. But it's a stand of black acacias with a couple of palm ferns thrown into the mix, and they've grown up. They're not native. They're a fire hazard. We know that, and I think the fire folk can acknowledge that as well, or know that as well. They provide, over the years, they provide cover for all kinds of, I think I said at one meeting, nefarious behavior. Everything from smoking and drinking and making out and kind of the usual things that might happen if you have a little bit of shade and cover. It's provided cover for people who decide to put graffiti on fences. We've had BBs come through our window for kids who, and we're assuming kids, but it could be a person who's decided to, maybe take their BB gun out and shoot it around. So we've had 2 windows that have had BBs come through. And more pertinent to the trees, though, is that in 2015, a stand actually blew down and fell across the High Canal towards the pump station, almost making a bridge across the canal. Prior to that, I had, brought to the town's attention that maybe we ought to do something about these things. And it was only after they fell in 2015 that I think it was Vernon and the crew were out there in a heartbeat, making sure that the embankment was secure and that the downed trees were removed. And they didn't do any trimming that year, but the downed trees were removed. In 2016, more trees fell across the path, grazing fences, and thankfully not hitting anybody on the path. That path is used by a lot of kids, a lot of folks with children and strollers. I walk it 2 to 3 times a week. So it gets a lot of traffic, and not just in the morning hours during school time, but also throughout the day. So we were really glad that finally in 2017, Small World Tree Company, which I understand was under contract by the city, it came out and actually trimmed the trees, but did nothing to limb them up or lower the, I guess, the crotch of the tree to make them look more tree-like. They, kind of like just topped them off like a hedge, did nothing about the thinning, and now they're, back tall again. And when I remember when I went out there when they were pruning the trees, because I'd asked to have something done, the arborist said, he goes, well, they're plants, they're just going to grow back again. And I'm like, yeah, I understand how that works with plants. Unless you remove the roots, they're going to come back. So I guess in short order, and I can send each of you a more fulsome report with video and photographs of what's been happening over the years. Our concern is that, they are a health and safety hazard. They are, they block views. When we moved here in 1989, we had pretty much a dead-on view of Mount Tam. And for a while, the town did trim the suckers, but then at some point they, around 1998, they stopped trimming the suckers, and now we have a stand of trees. So, and I would be happy to share, again, a more fulsome report with photographs from 1998 to where we are now today about, what's been going on with the stand of black acacia trees. So maybe my concern falls under the shade fuel break chapter of this Zoom meeting, and I'd be happy to, have you guys come out and take a look at it, or send emails with more information about that. But I'm just taking this opportunity to, in a different, in a 2022 way, raise an issue that many of us have had for a long time, for decades. Probably when many of you who are currently in your fire jobs were battalion chiefs, and now you've come up to you've risen to a different place in your professional life, but these concerns are still with us. Anyway, I'm happy to answer questions, but if we need to take this off the air or to another time because people have more to share or there might be more questions, I'd be happy to do that.
Okay. No, I appreciate your comments. Let's take it offline, and let me talk to Corte Madera, Todd. Or Todd, I don't know if you have any comments now.
For me, Mary, as a fire chief, yeah, send me some pictures, send me where you're at, send me what the concerns are. We'll be more than happy to come out and take a look.
Okay. Yeah. And we're not in
what we can do.
Yeah, we're not in one of those WI zone, WUI zone, but it's they're 10 feet away from someone's fence, and I just think, the neighbors talk about it, and we're like, geez, this is not a good thing. So
I'd love to talk to you offline.
Yeah,
feel free to email me or
is your email up on is it up on the town website or something?
Yeah, it should be. If not, I'll put it here on the chat.
All right, thanks.
If it's up. If not, it's just rmartin@centralrentfire.org.
Okay. All righty, thanks. Yeah, I'll try to condense it.
Yeah, no worries, absolutely. We'd love to have a conversation with you.
All righty, thank you so much.
Sure. You're welcome, and thanks again. I appreciate the comments. This is one of the purposes these forums are for, is again to have open discussions and get feedback from residents. So I think it's all good.
I was thrilled when I thought, oh my gosh, it's the fire thing, yay! So again, thank you, Mayor Casisa, and everybody for being willing to hear us out. Thank you. It's really important.
No problem. Hey, Todd, two other quick questions on the 38-mile guide. One is, it sounds like it's not like you're going to be bringing in heavy equipment to do this stuff. It sounds like it's going to be a lot of manual work that's going to have to be thrown at this. And the other part is that I think it may be Lower Summit Road or Middle Summit Road off Christmas Tree Hill. There was some work done in those areas that may be an example of what the work the fuel break will kind of look like.
Yeah, the work on the lower and middle Summit Fire Road was done over the course of the last 2 years. Some of that work was funded through a grant from CAL FIRE, some funded through the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority. And there are some similarities to the vegetation work that we did there. In the sense that what the work we did was pulling broom, limbing trees up. We did not remove mature trees with the exception of a handful of diseased trees or trees that had structural problems that threatened to fall across those fire roads if they were burning. So for the most part, mature native trees were left in place. They were pruned in a way that makes them healthier and more resistant to fire. We pulled a tremendous amount of broom. If my memory recalls, it was about 800 cubic yards of chips of just broom that we removed.
Wow.
So huge amount of vegetation. The intent there was to reduce the amount of heat that fire road might be exposed to during a fire, both to provide some added safety for fire engines that might be using those roads to access the community. Our goal really is to send fire engines, should there be a wildfire, up those fire roads to access the neighborhoods to fight the fire so that residents can stay on the pavement, which is the safest place for evacuating residents. We know there's a lot of concern about what might happen if the residents ran into a fire engine coming up the hill while they're trying to evacuate. We're well aware of that possibility and concern, and opening those fire roads up to make them safer for four-wheel drive fire engines is really the best route that we can take to help protect Christmas Tree Hill. It is similar in one sense, but the reality is we don't consider that necessarily a shaded fuel break. The intent is just to reduce the amount of heat next to the fire road. But overall, what you'll be looking at is work along those lines, adjacent to homes, pulling broom, a lot of manual work. You're absolutely right. Of the 38-mile fuel break, we think that about 25 miles of that work will be conducted by hand crews. Tree services, folks like our Tamalpais fire crew or the new Foundry work crew that we have available to us in Marin. They'll be cut using chainsaws and hand tools to pull broom, to limb trees up. In some cases, they'll build piles of vegetation that we will then burn during the winter when it's safe to do that. In some cases, they'll use wood chippers or haul the material away to be disposed of at a green waste facility. The remaining, I said 25 miles, that leaves about 13 miles or so, and this is very flexible. There will be a number of miles of the fuel break that will be treated with goats and grazing animals, goats and sheep primarily. There will be some portions of the fuel break that we simply don't need to touch. If there is a location that is already grasses growing, native grasses growing underneath a nice mature canopy of oak trees, we don't need to do anything there. It's already done for us. And there are places that are like that because either neighbors have taken good care of the land, Parks and Open Space has. In some places there's been regular grazing. There have been some wildfires in the area. There are a number of reasons why certain pieces of ground just don't need any attention right now. They already meet the conditions we're looking for. And when you add it all up, we'll be treating or at least inspecting and protecting the 38 miles.
Okay, thanks. And I know one thing I was impressed with when I first heard about the 38 miles, I was thinking, okay, like you're going to leverage off existing trails, but no, it's more like it's 200 feet and you're going all around homes on that 38 miles. And I think the image that sticks in my mind is when you hit kind of Madrone Canyon, it's not like you're taking a shortcut and cutting across, you're actually like zigzagging in again against homes and zigzagging back out. It's impressive.
It's tough work. What I really want to emphasize, people, I know that there are a handful of community members who are really concerned that this is going to be a heavy-handed approach. Then I think there are residents who really want this work to be done and are anxious to see it done and are very supportive right now. In the end, I think our success may be measured when both sides are somewhat unhappy or don't even realize the work has happened. That this is going to be a very light touch on the land. It's not going to make a dramatic impact on the aesthetics or the visuals in many places. If anything, you're going to see a return to probably what the hills of Larkspur, Corte Madera, and Fairfax looked like 50, 75 years ago in those locations. And it's going to open up the long-term maintenance for us. It'll make the access better. It'll allow the property owners who are really responsible for this land to conduct routine maintenance each year in a way they're not able to now because the workload has just become out of control for them.
It almost sounds like when I go get a haircut and I tell her, don't buzz it where there's nothing left. But I tell her just to give me, a very nice cut and a very nice trim. That's what I mean. I'll be honest, that's what it sounds like, because again, it's not a buzz job. It's a trim.
Exactly. That's a great analogy.
Thanks. Two other topics I want to cover. One is insurance, which I'm going to ask Mark about. And then after that, Ruben, I want to talk to you about fire inspections. But Mark, insurance. I believe in Mill Valley last year, there were some streets in Mill Valley whereby homeowners insurance, the insurance company canceled them, mostly because they were in a WUI, they were on narrow streets, and then people had a difficult time trying to get homeowners insurance, and they were paying through the roof. Again, they're in a WUI type area with very small streets. I know there's a project you're looking at that I think a city in Colorado had done. Can you talk about that and potentially what that could mean in Marin? And again, I know it's all potential.
Yeah, and actually it's something I'm really excited about. So the first part of it is what you were asking about is in Boulder, Colorado, on the west side of Boulder County, a group called Wildfire Partners. And now remember, they don't have an MWPA. They don't have a crew of a corps of inspectors going out and doing defensible space inspections. So they're partnering with insurance companies and private industry to provide those inspections. If people ask for those inspections. And then if the homeowner complies with all the recommendations of the inspections, the insurance companies have guaranteed not to non-renew or cancel their insurance. So I see that we've already got two pieces of that equation. We already have a comprehensive inspection program. People don't even have to ask for it. It's already being paid for, which is a big part of the Wildfire Partners. We just have to get our residents to comply, which a lot of them are eager to do. And then we have to get the promise from the insurance companies. And so we are meeting, right this time, it's still in the realm of the MWPA entering in non-disclosure agreements with some insurance companies because they can't share what they're doing with their industry partners. But we have multiple insurance companies that are wanting to partner with the MWPA for pilot projects that include this type of agreement, but also include financial incentives for getting the work done, which falls in line with the framework for a safer California. And then even exploring the option of providing grants, so-called or similar to grants, to get the work done within our community. So we're very excited about that. But when it comes to non-renewals and cancellations that we are already experiencing, I'm actually going to turn to Todd because Todd deals with that for Corte Madera and Larkspur for Central Marin Fire quite a bit. And we have a pretty good process to working with our residents and their insurance companies to keep their insurance. So Todd?
Yeah, this is a significant concern. Right now, what we're finding, I think for the first time in probably the last 5 years, the insurance companies are paying attention to the work that we're doing and that residents are doing. And we're seeing what I think is hopefully the beginning of a trend in that mitigation work done around structures, whether it's home hardening upgrades that homeowners do to reduce the ignitability of the building itself or the defensible space they create around their homes, is actually gaining traction and in some cases reversing the decisions that insurance companies made to non-renew, as they call it. I think cancellation is just as appropriate, but policies. So we're seeing this trend. I'll just say that before the North Bay fires, when an insurance company sent a letter saying we don't want to renew your policy due to wildfire risk, there was always a clause at the end of that letter that gave residents an opportunity to dispute or provide evidence that their property risk wasn't as high as the insurance company said it was. And the insurance companies, if the fire department provided assistance, provided a letter or an inspection showing that the property complied with the fire codes, before the North Bay fires, I think my track record was about 100%. The insurance companies would reverse their decision. After the North Bay fires, over the last 5 to 6 years, we've seen that trend drop dramatically. And there was a couple of years where I think they didn't even make the offer to review the non-renewal. They simply canceled every policy with no recourse for the resident. So the fact that we're starting to see a little bit of traction, we're seeing insurance companies work with us for the first time in my career, I think is a really good sign for the future of insurance here in Marin.
Thanks. And before we get to Ruben on fire inspections, I'm going to go back to the fuel break just real quick. Has anybody in California or the country, had tried something like this before for that length, doing a 38-mile fuel break?
Oh, I absolutely. Yeah, it's been done elsewhere. The U.S. Forest Service, the National Park Service, and even other parts of California have done work on this scale, not with the same funding mechanism and not necessarily right in people's backyards where we think it'll be most effective. But yeah. And I just point out that in California during the WPA era, during the Depression, had an 800-mile long fuel break in the Sierra Nevada. So ours seems like a big deal, but it's not even close to the biggest.
It's a big deal for all of us. So it's all good. Ruben, do you want to talk about fire inspections that are coming up? And I know one thing that usually comes up is, so you do the inspection and somebody just kind of ignores it and doesn't do anything, fix anything. And I'm not talking about maybe little stuff, the larger stuff that you have more concern about. How do you address that, and what's the process? How does it get escalated up?
Yeah, absolutely. So 2 good points. One, we'll start with the inspection side of it. Last week, we started our defensible space inspections using funding that is allocated to us through the MWPA and Measure C. We get 20% of the funds that are collected goes directly towards defensible space inspections. Prior to MWPA coming aboard and us having that funding, we went out and did these inspections. However, to do a properly home evaluation, it takes about 20 minutes or so, 30 minutes to do a full 360 evaluation of a property, which, can you imagine sending our engine up to the top of Christmas Tree Hill? It completely takes our fire crews who are basically here to respond to 911 calls, and were never designed to do individual home inspections. So that's what we relied on, our Fire Prevention Bureau, which at the time was one person, myself, which went out and targeted certain communities with the help of our NRG leadership to be able to identify and sign people up for us. With the start of Measure C and having these fundings, what we do here locally is we try to do a regional approach, thinking that us alone as Central Warren Fire Department, we don't have the capabilities to hire 15, 20 individuals to go out then and canvass the entire neighborhood, hit every single home that's high risk. For example, within our jurisdiction, we have 4,000 parcels that are located within the wildland urban interface. And to try to hit those every single year becomes daunting with just us alone as a jurisdiction. So we took a regional approach, partnering with both Kentfield, Ross Valley Fire Department, and Marin County Fire Department to hire 20 to 25 inspectors annually on a seasonal basis, train them to a 2-3 week academy, and Todd Lando being one of the lead instructors out there, training them to what to look for to become a more resilient, or how to educate a homeowner to become more resilient. With that, on the fire prevention side of it, we usually have a few tools in our toolbox. One is to fix something through engineering, which is how do you make your house more resilient, is through the type of building products that are available out there through building codes. The other one is through education. Is going out and meeting with homeowners, explaining to them what the hazards are immediately around their home and what they can do to then mitigate some of those hazards. And then the third one is enforcement, which then brings the entire tools that we have within the California Fire Code and within the town of Corte Madera's municipal code to then come about the entire abatement process. Meaning, if you as a homeowner, we'll say homeowner A, we go out and do an evaluation and we find that your home and property is completely unmanageable, a complete fire hazard, everything's overgrown. We would then make contact with the homeowner, give them that educational component, try to encourage them, is that other E that I throw in there in the encouragement side of it, trying to say, okay, this is why you need to do it. This is why you're going to benefit from doing this, not only for yourself, but your surrounding community. Most of the time, we'll say about 90% of the time, our homeowners and residents are encouraged and will do the work. However, there are certain instances where we tend to find reasons why the work wasn't done. So typically 30 days after the initial inspection, we would go out and do a secondary follow-up to try to figure out why the work wasn't done. Typically, a lot of times it's financial reasons. Most of us in Marin are what I like to say, property rich and dollar poor. Yes, our properties are worth, $1 million plus, but we don't have $1 million of expendable revenue sitting around where we can then hire a contractor for 10, 15,000. Sometimes they're homeowners that may have functional needs on a fixed income to where they don't have the means available to then hire a contractor for several $1,000s because they need to, one, pay their bills, and two, eat. The next side of it is those homeowners that tend to draw the line in the sand and basically bear down, and I don't care what you tell me, the government isn't going to tell me what to do. No one can tell me what to do. I don't care. And so those are the ones that usually tend to have more staff time involved to try to mitigate those. And we'll get to that in a second, but those that we find that are either in functional needs or in financial difficulties, what we try to do here within Central Marin is what we call a voluntary abatement program, where you as a homeowner have been identified that needs work to be done. You want the work to be done, but unfortunately for certain reasons, you're unable to get the work done, whether unable to find contractors, unable to pay for the work to be done. We as a Central Marin Fire Department, utilizing Measure C funding, will then come back and say, okay, what can we do for you to help you to then get your property back to a state where it's manageable? Basically hit the reset button for the homeowner to where then we can turn the property back over to them and they can maintain it. And that's where we get into that voluntary abatement program. And depending on where the situation of the resident is, we've gone anywhere from a 25% all the way up to 100% cost for the abatement of the property. On the other side of it, where we got the homeowner who is completely defiant of what we ever want to do to try to protect them from themselves, we then go through the municipal code within the Corte Madera as through declaring the property a nuisance. It's basically what I call is bringing the neighbor or the property owner before town council and publicly shame them to try to get them motivated to do the work. If that doesn't work, then we have within the municipal code where we can then get a court-ordered abatement, basically getting a subpoena from a judge to be able to get onto the property to then completely abate it. We've gone through the process a few years ago where we had abated 3 properties, court-ordered abatements. Let me tell you, that takes about 12 to 18 months from start to finish to get a property abated. Which to me told me why a lot of fire agencies and municipalities don't go down that route, because the cost and the staff time it takes to abate one property, when I can take the time and resources to then try to leverage some financial gains for the property owner. Basically, we dangle the carrot or we hit them with the hammer is kind of what we try to do. And we found by dangling the carrot, we tend to be get more response and more compliance with the homeowner. So that's kind of the process that we go through abating a property. Those that do go through court-ordered abatements, we also have a point within the municipal code where we can actually levy a lien on their property, basically recoup all of the town's and fire department's costs and put that onto the property owner and levy the property as a lien. So those are some of the tools that we have in our toolbox to try to mitigate some of the fire hazards out there. What I like to do is I try to educate and encourage and hopefully try to get some compliance and some partnership between the homeowners because we're here trying to make you more resilient and try to for you and your properties to survive in the event of a wildfire should come through our neighborhoods.
Thanks. And then I'm pretty sure you posted the schedule online, but I know the fire inspections, they're rotated from year to year. Like I know ours was done last year. We're on the east side, I'm sorry, the bay side. They're rotated around. Can you just maybe off the top of your head, maybe like some of the neighborhoods are going to get have fire inspections this year?
Yeah, so we did all of Palm Hill last week. This week, they're actually Monday, they started up on Christmas Tree Hill, and we're going to hit everything on the Christmas Tree Hill side and everything west of Magnolia. So we try to break up west of Magnolia and then east side of Corte Madera, and then our Greenberry Hill side of our jurisdiction. And so on average, we break it up to about 2,000 inspections annually.
Okay, thanks. And I know last year when we had ours done, the fire inspectors, they're really great. They're uniform. You can tell who they are. They're identifiable. They walked through our house with us on the outside, pointing different things out. They gave us the report, so it's totally worthwhile. So I think it's a great.
It is, and just so you're aware, is our fire inspectors aren't going to trespass on your properties. We don't trespass with the fire department. What we do is through curtilage is kind of like the UPS approach. If we can get through an unlocked gate to knock on your front door, similar to either the postal service would do, anything that we see that's in plain sight there, as we would comment on, and use a property owner have the right to allow us on your property or tell us to leave. However, we recommend that you allow us to come on the property, not only because we're not there to try to enforce anything on you. What we're trying to do is educate you and trying to make you and your properties as survivable as possible.
Okay, thanks. Keith, go ahead. You have your hand raised.
Yes. Hi, Ruben. We appreciate the inspection you did on our home a couple, 3 years ago. It was very helpful. Ruben came out and visited several homes in our NRG area. Just a question following up on the issue of enforcement. We now have a neighbor we've just realized is a 30-foot tall stand of bamboo, which is a fire hazard. How do you want us to deal with situations like that in terms of, should we be letting somebody know, or is there a process that we could at least make our concerns known to the city?
Yeah, it's you can definitely notify us here at the fire department. You can email both Todd or myself directly, or through our info@centralmarinfire.org to try to say what the address is, what the issues are. One of the things what we're doing a little bit different this year with our inspection program, for the first several years, what we try to do is educate. And what we're going to start doing this year is we're actually going to do a lot of re-inspections and really come down on the enforcement component of it, whether it's through a voluntary abatement process or through a court-ordered abatement process. And we're hearing from the community members that, yes, you came out, you looked at my property, you looked at my neighbor's property, but nothing ever happened. And so at this point, we were giving every homeowner the opportunity to get educated and then encouraging them to get the work done. However, we find sometimes, like we mentioned earlier, that's the stand of bamboo can get expensive to get removed. And they're looking at it, probably got bids for it, and it's up in the thousands of dollar range that they probably can't afford it to get removed. And that's where we would come in and talk to the property owner and see what we could do to try to assist with that.
That would be super. And I'm glad to hear you're looking at more intense enforcement. I think we will really appreciate that.
Yeah, and then this year, what we're really concentrating on is the juniper, the bamboo, and Italian cypresses that are within that zone 0 of a property, which is that 0 to 5 feet, which scientifically is stated that that's where the ambers are going to land, and that's where it's going to cause a lot of these home ignitions.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Keith. My mom lives in Terra Linda in Santa Fe, and last year she had a fire inspection in her house. She had a ton of junipers. We went up getting rid of all of them because that was one of the things they told my mom she needed to do. One quick question on the fire inspection, then we'll go to Susie because she had a hand up, and then we'll try to wrap this up in the next 5 minutes or so. If anytime during the year, can I have my home inspected for if I sit there saying, hey, I haven't had this done in a while, can I just reach out? I don't want to say, Ruben, to you directly, but Central Marin Fire and say, hey, can you guys send somebody out to take a look? Because I think I may have some issues.
Yes, absolutely. We designate neighborhoods to try to canvass with our entire inspection group as part of our Defensible Spaces inspection program. However, if you feel like your home hasn't been inspected or you weren't around when that inspection came through, feel free to reach out to us and we'll be more than happy to send an inspector up there.
Okay, thanks. Susie, you had a question?
Just wondered what your take is on the wood chips that are being brought into these front yards. There's MMWDs encouraging people to take their lawns out. They're bringing these wood chips in. I've brought this up before. It happens the wood chips are all going down the drains in East Corte Madera too. But I just, from a fire perspective, I just, they're all over the place and they're a mess.
The wood chips aren't a significant fire hazard unless they're within about 5 feet of the house. So we have some guidelines, some recommendations on how to use them. They hold moisture in the soil. They do not ignite that easily. They do ignite, and when they burn, they don't release a lot of heat. The flames are low. So as long as there's separation between the wood chips and the house, there are probably more benefits than drawbacks from wood chips. Larger wood chips are better, more resistant to igniting than smaller ones. But we don't say that you can't use them. We just don't want to see them within 5 feet of any part of a structure.
Yeah. Thank you.
And definitely stay away from gorilla hair, which is shredded redwood bark, because that's basically kindling when you think about it.
And say, Todd, when you're training the inspectors, you might want to pass that on to them, because I spent many hours removing wood chips from my property after the inspection.
Well, I'll tell you, part of it, I want you to understand, I appreciate that you did that. Some of our understanding is evolving. We've managed to burn 50,000 houses in the last 8 years in California. And in our understanding of how some of these materials react during these fires has evolved. So the guidelines have somewhat changed. We're now asking people, not necessarily to remove those wood chips because it was somewhat unnecessary beyond 5 feet from the house. So I apologize that we might have caught you at a time where we weren't entirely sure how those were reacting. And we were asking people to remove wood chips farther from the house. We still ask you, like Chief Martin said, to remove gorilla hair mulch, which is that shredded redwood, anywhere it is on your property.
Yeah, I appreciate that. We're just about to do some more landscaping, and it's nice to know on the back of our property we could use a few wood chips. So thank you.
Thanks. Okay, and to wrap this up, 2 final questions. One is, what's your, this is for each of you, what's your biggest concern besides the obvious? And the second question is, if you had to give one piece of advice to residents, what would you give? And what's good about this is because you're each answering the question, everybody actually gets 3 pieces of advice. So I don't know, Mark, if you want to start first.
So what scares me the most is when I watch these extreme fires burning throughout the state. And it just seems like they started in the north, started on the south, and they're zeroing in on Marin. And Marin's been left relatively untouched with extreme fire. And it just seems like the target is narrowing in on us. And if Santa Cruz can burn 80,000 acres in short order, so can Marin. And if I can just give one piece of advice to anybody, it is in some way, shape, or form, take action towards wildfire mitigation, because the strength of our communities is some of our parts. So if everyone does their part, we're that much stronger.
Thanks. Ruben?
What scares me the most, I think, is the intensity of the wind events that have been happening recently, especially when the fire ignites. When you start having 70, 80, 90 mile an hour winds, that's what keeps me up at night during the summer months. Anytime the wind blows, the hair on the back of my neck stands up. Just for kind of what Mark Brown had mentioned, is because Marin has been passed over for several decades, that it's not a matter of if, but when. A piece of advice that I can give is please, please, please sign up for your alerts. Alert Marin. Let your neighbors know how to sign up for Alert Marin. And if you haven't already done so, please get a little quick go bag together with a quick evacuation emergency kit and have it readily available so you can get up and go in a moment's notice.
Thanks. And Todd?
I could easily echo what Chief Martin and Chief Brown said, but I think what actually probably scares me the most is that during a wildfire event, that residents might forget some of the lessons that we've been speaking about for the last several years related to wildfire evacuation. We have evacuation routes in the Ross Valley that are effective, that will allow people to get in their cars and onto pavement and get to the safety of the valley floor. I'm very concerned that people are going to get out of their cars and try to evacuate on foot, or fail to evacuate at all, and that will cost lives. I don't want to think about this, but we can rebuild the community. We can rebuild individual homes. We can't restore lives once they've been lost to a fire. And so I think our evacuation messaging and building a better community understanding of what an evacuation is actually like, and the best choices that they can make during an evacuation is probably it's still something we need to work on.
Thanks. And we have one hand raised. Patty, you have a question or a comment?
I just had a comment. I don't think anyone has mentioned emergency.marincounty.org, but I just learned at my Apple class today how to take a website and make a little entry to it on your iPhone. So if anybody wants to know how you can do that, so when you're going through your apps, it's not an app, it's just a little way that you can get from pushing just that one spot on your phone and be on the website for that emergency.
Okay, thanks for that. Appreciate that. Okay, so for Mark, Ruben, and Todd, I'll speak for all of us. We really appreciate your time. I think this was totally informative. I think your emails are out there on websites, so I'm going to assume that people can contact you with any questions they have. And I just want to appreciate all the hard work you're doing. I know sometimes, like on vegetation, mitigation, it may go unnoticed because it's not right in front of us and we don't see it. But I think all this stuff is going to add up between that, the fire inspections. It's all going to add up, and hopefully, and it never happens, but if it does, if we do get hit by a fire, all this stuff is going to pay off. Sometimes we don't see that in the short run, and it may be the long run. But again, I think it's all going to pay off. It's all great work. So we really appreciate everything you guys are doing. And not just you, but also your staffs and all the firefighters. We greatly appreciate it. So again, I thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Oh, you're
Thank
welcome.
Thank you.
One last piece. Oh, people dropped off. One last piece. I don't know, Todd Cusimano, do you have any updates from the town standpoint?
Oh, just thank God for our fire team. They're doing some great work. Good job, team.
Just one thing from me before we sign off and everybody leaves the meeting, and just a reminder that town council meetings, they're now hybrid. We did our first one last week. So it's a hybrid mode. So if you want to show up in person, you can show up in person, or you can still zoom in. I call it zooming in. You can still dial into it. So again, you have options on what you want to do. So if you want to show up in person, that's great. If you want to sit at home and have dinner and listen to the meetings, that's fine with us also. We went to a hybrid model. So, and again, if there's any questions, please feel free. Any town activities, events, anything you're worried about, please feel free to either email myself or staff is great. So I'm looking at Todd. Either one of us or the both of us, please feel free to reach out to us. So again, I appreciate everybody's time. Thanks.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks. Have a good evening.